Ben Roethlisberger had a lot to say over the weekend in an article written by Ron Cook in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We'll talk about that because it addresses the Steelers, Mike Tomlin, Kevin Colbert, how they've operated, and kind of how they look moving forward. We'll talk about his comments and more right here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Wes Uhler from Steeler Nation Radio today. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button on this video if you enjoyed. Hit the subscribe button on this YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our breaking news updates. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered all season long with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. We thank Wes Uhler for returning to the show, our man from Steeler Nation Radio, Ears and Beers podcast as well for all you West Virginia fans. Wes, what's up?
Mr. Carter, last week of summer, it feels like, is in the books now.
Basically.
As training camp begins. I'm half jacked up and excited to get back to Latrobe. I'm, half sad that the summer is over and our lives are about to be over.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, all the freedoms that we've enjoyed. Like, I've liked taking my girlfriend out more than I normally do during the season.
Mm-hmm.
I liked coming home and not having to write 3 more things or do all this. So that was fun. But that's over because the Steelers are about to go to training camp. Football. But let's dive right into what was said by Ben Roethlisberger in an article written by Ron Cook of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Back on the 22nd, so this was Friday.
Can I just say, too, we're at a point now where if Ron Cook has an article where he spoke to Ben, just expect bombs to be dropped.
Yep, it's pretty much what happens each time that's occurred over the years because those two are pretty close.
Yeah.
But Ben Roethlisberger said some good things about the team. He talked about he talked about how he was talking to Kenny Pickett saying, hey, just be yourself. He told Trubisky, you don't have to go out and be special. He said, this is a team that you don't have to have a superstar. They've got a great defense. You're probably going to, have you go out and not try to put too many games on your shoulders. He did say good things there. And he also talked about, he loved the fact that he never had a losing season and that he was able to win 2 championships for the city. So there were some really rosy moments and talk about Super Bowl 43 and that. But the interesting part that I think that really sparked up a lot of flames when this article turned and all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, wait a second, was when he started to talk about his regrets. And some of his regrets revolved around only winning 3 playoff games since the 2010 Super Bowl run. And he talked about this and he said, I feel like the game has changed. I feel like the people have changed in a sense. Maybe it's because I got spoiled when I came in, but the team was so important. It was all about the team. Now it's about me, this and that and the other. I might be standing on a soapbox a little bit, but that's my biggest takeaway. And from when I started to the end, it turned from a team first to a me type attitude. It was hard, and it was hard for these young guys too. Social media, they're treated so well in college. Now this new NIL stuff, which is unbelievable. They're treated so special. They're coddled at a young age because college coaches need them to win too. I know Coach Terry Hopner, his high school coach, his college coach, never coddled me at Miami of Ohio. Neither did Bill Cowher. Now, before we move on, it is very interesting that he said that Hopner never coddled him and Cowher never called him, and that's specifically leaving off Mike Tomlin, and that sort of ties back to what his stance is about, the mentality and how things changed and how there wasn't, I guess, a lack of leadership at times on the Steelers. To me, Wes, it seems like for a person to be the franchise quarterback, it'd be one thing if he was, a random safety on the team or a random guy who wasn't, but to be the guy that they built the team around, the guy that made the most money during that era of those teams, the guy that everyone, worked to kind of make sure that the team could work for him to talk about the leadership and the changing the mentality and no one stood up in those moments. It seems like it's like he's insulting himself almost. Like why?
Yeah.
Why aren't you? That's not a they thing. You're in that conversation.
You're the quarterback. It's like the same conversation with starting pitchers in baseball, right? Are wins and losses really a pitcher stat? Are they really a quarterback stat? We can argue about that forever. but the perception is there that if your team wins games, you're a good starting pitcher, you're a good NFL quarterback. If your team loses games, you're not very good. And so, yeah, that to me, it seemed like a little bit of a passing of the buck there from Ben. And obviously, it was not just Ben Roethlisberger. He's not the only reason why the Steelers won 3 playoff games in his last decade with the team. But he also wasn't the reason that they won more. They won the last playoff win for the organization was in Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City, where the offense didn't score a single touchdown. Chris Boswell kicked 6 field goals, and that's how they won the game. The defense was pretty darn good. In games like Jacksonville and against Cleveland, Ben played really well at times, but he also had a lot of early turnovers that put the Steelers on the back foot, and they were playing catch-up the rest of the way. Just to me, a lot of this just seems unnecessary. And, the part where he calls out his younger teammates, Chris, listen, you and I are both getting there, all right? We're not young anymore. We're not old yet, but we're well into our 30s. We're well into our 30s. We're not young anymore, but we're not old either. But, Chris, I'm young enough to remember Ben Roethlisberger being at WWE Raw and doing the suck it with Shawn Michaels and Triple H.
Yep.
That's not a young guy having fun and enjoying themselves. I remember him going to the ESPYs and being the guest of honor, right? And he gets out in the outfit with the Bettis jersey and the suit and the Jordan hat. That's not being out and about and enjoying your life as a young person. Forget all the other stuff too, right? Just those moments when he talks about the younger guys and it's about me. Okay, doing the crotch chop with Triple H wasn't about you. Telling everybody to suck it with Shawn Michaels wasn't about you. It's not the end of the world. Like, I don't think Ben Roethlisberger owes everybody some apology or anything.
Yeah, it doesn't make him a bad person. It makes you hypocritical.
It was a little hypocritical, a little tone deaf, and a little, honestly, like the Simpsons old man yells at cloud. Like, dude, you were doing this same stuff. You were enjoying the life of a young celebrity athlete when you were their age as well, too. There just wasn't TikTok and Instagram. It was you showing up at the ESPYs. It was you out there on Monday Night Raw.
And I also think it's interesting because it's like, okay, say you went through that. Again, nothing bad about that. But if you saw a problem with that in the locker room,
say something.
You could have been the person to say, hey guys, I trust me, I lived that life. Didn't do much for me. Didn't make me as good of a player. I could be so much better, and I am so much better because I'm not doing that stuff anymore. Follow my lead. That didn't happen. He wasn't that guy for the Steelers, and I think that speaks to, it's like, man, how are you pointing over here and pointing over there and saying it's these guys? Is that this is what's changed when you were standing right in the middle of it? And look, I get if like for example, Troy Polamalu once said, it was different. He wasn't able really to talk to players like Antonio Brown, but Troy Polamalu was also the back end of his career. He knew his value with the team wasn't that important anymore. He didn't have much of a say in things as far as like what the future plans were going to hold. Ben Roethlisberger through that time was in the prime of his career. He called all the shots. They were not going to force him out. Polamalu was about to get forced out. Hines Ward was about to get forced out. Like, those guys are like, hey, they're like, hey guys, we know that you want to keep playing, but your prime is long gone, and we can't pay you the money that you think you deserve. So it's best if you just retire a Steeler. They didn't do that to Ben until just now. So for him to act like he was, one of the people that was, aggrieved or whatever over that situation, to me, it seems a little short-sighted, a little hollow or shallow to kind of say that and leave yourself out of the situation. But like I said, it also comes down to when he did retire. He had some other comments about his decision to retire and how he felt about having to retire this year. We'll talk about those in just a minute right here. And I want to tie it back to Mike Tomlin because to me, these comments they sparked a little fire there that I saw a lot of Steelers fans in our Locked On Steelers Facebook group were arguing about. A lot of Steelers fans on Twitter have been arguing about. I think it's important to have a discussion. We'll do that with Wes Uhler in a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, we got to talk to you guys about BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports information. With Major League Baseball well underway, they're in the second half of the season. You want to put your money down on that, but you can also put money down on future bet props as these other sports come back around. The NFL training camps opening up this week, so you want to get in on that. NBA is around the corner, so is NHL. All the college sports. We also do golf as well on BetOnline.net. Put money down on different odds odds, make money, and learn about all the different ways to do that on betonline.net, your continued source for all your sports wagering information from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action when you visit BetOnline, where the game starts. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter. He's Wes Uhler. We're talking about the Ben Roethlisberger article where he was interviewed by Ron Cook of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and talking about the situation that's going on with, how he saw things ending with his career. Now, as the article continued, he talked about with his retirement, he didn't feel like it was all his decision. He said it was mostly Kevin Colbert. This is a direct quote from the article. It was mostly Kevin Colbert. He was ready to move on. I think Mike Tomlin was a little ready to move on, but I think he was okay with me coming back. I think Mr. Art Rooney really wanted me to come back last year to play. I thought I went out on my own terms, never wanted to stay too long. I knew some people might think I did. You stayed last year, but I thought I played pretty well last year, to be honest. My arm still feels like I still could go out and play. I'm pretty confident I could still play, but it's every day. It's mental, not having to prepare for camp, and the season has been the biggest blessing for me. I'm fine with where I'm at with everything. So all that being said, I think the back end of that is fine. I get it. He's older than us, Wes. So he's about to be hitting 40, and he's like, I don't want to deal with that. Listen, if I was him, I wouldn't want to deal with that. But
Chris, I'm 31, and I'm worried about the heat at training camp.
Right, bro. We're not
throwing
throwing nothing. We're not running. We're not
wearing any pads
on. We're just sitting there watching them, and we're like, man, I'm not sure if I want to do this anymore.
I'm looking at the weather app on my phone. It's supposed to be like 91 degrees in the afternoon. I'm like, oh Lord, I'm gonna be dying.
Oh, it's gonna be a beast. But. Back to what he was saying here. I want to focus back on this part here where he talked about Kevin Colbert being ready to move on and Mike Tomlin. I feel like Ben Roethlisberger, he can do and say whatever he wants.
Sure.
But for his entire career, Kevin Colbert stuck by him. The Rooneys stuck by him. Mike Tomlin stuck by him. Ain't nobody ever put his business out in the street. And I think this is I think this isn't the most kosher thing to do or the most appreciative thing to do to say what, where they were on him moving on. Just be like, hey man, I retired. I got to go to a playoff game. I got to sweep the Browns. We, talk about that. But to bring up, I guess, those type of things, I feel like it comes off like an unappreciative, like the Steelers gave you one of the greatest sends off we've seen in modern American sports. How many times do you get to see a sports legend play their last game in their own stadium in the kind of environment the Steelers created for him, with the entire stadium saying, thank you, Ben, and all the presentations that were done, all the things. And then for them to beat the Cleveland Browns, who knocked them out of the playoffs the previous year, and for them to get the interception, to get him to take a knee for his final game at Heinz Field, and then for him to get to walk all the way around and all the fans sticking around, like that was a send-off of all send-offs. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I would never besmirch the Steelers. And that's not even talking about how when he had 2 different sexual assault allegations that never got to full punch, but did get him suspended twice and did get the team in a bad spotlight. And never did they step away from him and they say, you know what, that's not our quarterback anymore. Never did we're trading him. That never happened. They stuck by him. They paid him a ton of money. They got him superstar players to work with. And it's like, I just feel like after all the investments they made, I wouldn't be going out and saying anything about anyone's decisions about my career when I had such a great career.
I mean, buddy, you just said it so well. Listen, we all could argue a lot of things about Ben Roethlisberger, right?
Sure.
A lot of different things in terms of his greatness and him versus Bradshaw and him versus a lot of the other quarterbacks and all these different things. Where does he rank on you? Like, we could argue a lot of this till the sun goes down and comes back up tomorrow. To me, the one thing that I don't think anyone can argue, if you're a Steelers fan, if you're Steelers media, if you're casual, if you're diehard, if you don't give a rip about the Steelers at all, somehow you're listening to this podcast, I don't think that you can argue that the Steelers, throughout his 18-year career, did everything to stand by Ben Roethlisberger and did right by him every step of the way. From the motorcycle stuff to the allegations, like you said, both on the field and off the field. When it came to his roster, when it came to his money, when it came to his say and who was going to be the offensive coordinators throughout his tenure, right? We could talk about Todd Haley and that exodus a lot, as much as we want to, right? Like, there's a lot of different things that we can argue and that there's gray area on with Ben Roethlisberger. To me, how the Steelers treated him is not one of those. From Mr. Rooney to Kevin Colbert to the few years with Bill Cowher and the large sample size with Mike Tomlin, from all his offensive coordinators that we know he had a say in that process throughout the majority of the time. Just to me, man, for what they invested in, not at the end of his career and at the very beginning of his career, but for that nice chunk of the middle of his career, what they invested in the offensive line, the amount of times that they used high draft picks on running backs and on wide receivers as well, too. The Steelers did everything right by Ben Roethlisberger for 18 years, and you can't always say that was a two-way street. You just can't. There's some of the off-the-field stuff. There was, when Ben had his own radio show and would throw darts at some of his teammates from time to time.
It's not
fair. It's not fair to try and make it seem like Kevin Colbert and company didn't stand by Ben Roethlisberger, because they did, and they did for 18 years.
To this day, I still say that the downward spiral of Antonio Brown started when Ben Roethlisberger threw an interception in the end zone that could have been a game-winning touchdown pass against the Broncos in 2018. And when he threw it to a defensive tackle, he blamed Pouncey and Antonio Brown.
Said AB had to run his route deeper, right?
It blamed it on them instead of. And if you look at the tape, all he had to do was wait another second, because it wasn't. There's no depth in the end zone. This was like at the 5-yard line or whatever. But if he waits,
3-yard line,
there was no pressure on him. If he waits one more second, he or just floats it to where Antonio Brown is running. The defensive tackle never has a chance, and it's a touchdown, and the Steelers win, and this is never a thing. But instead of taking, even if it was, let's say it was Antonio Brown's fault, how many times has Cam Heyward ever said it was someone else's fault for the run defense? Like when they were terrible last year, he said, I got to do better. That to me was always part of Ben's biggest gap. And I've talked about, hey, he doesn't study the field too well. He makes this mistake. To me, it was when moments like that where he would put it on someone else. And oftentimes you heard him talk about, I didn't call the plays. He would kind of hang his coordinator out to dry. The Jesse James catch game, when afterwards he threw an interception on a fake spike, and he said, well, there weren't 2 plays called, so I just made something up. And then you hear the sideline audio when Tomlin says, we're going 2 plays, and Todd Haley calls in 2 plays. And it's like just things like that. It's like, hey, man, like, I get it if you feel that way, but don't put your teammates, your coaches, your staff out on a limb like that. And a lot of times he did it, and it's like, man, you're retired. There's nobody's coming after you. You're going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, and you're still doing it.
Arguably the most beloved player in franchise history.
I mean, you can say that. There's the way
he's right up there with all those guys from the 70s.
I've
Troy
never heard
Polamalu,
anyone
he's right up there with all those.
Exactly. I've never heard anyone get the chance that he did to thank you, Ben. And there's a part of me, like, when he came, Wes, when he came into the league, we were in high school. Like, this guy.
Hey, I was in 8th grade, middle school, baby. Woo!
But I was in high school, and you're in 8th grade. Like, we're kids, and we're sitting there, and like, this guy was a hero. You remember the Big Ben Godsend picture that they'd always do. Like, this city honored that man. This organization honored that man. So it's just like, man, like, can you just?
The Penguins had a Ben Roethlisberger day. I forgot about that. Yes, the Pirates either had or are having a Ben Roethlisberger day. Hey, maybe Pitt will honor him at some point this fall too.
Maybe, who knows, at Acrisure Stadium. They should honor him at their most likely blowout game, which will be the first game, because they're blowing out West Virginia in the
Listen, how much you get your ACC banner in that game and everything? What are you gonna try and fit everything into that game? Are you gonna roll out Pat Bostic and Ben Roethlisberger and ACC champ, HP Blades and Scott McKillop? Game's not gonna start till 10:30 at night. LaShawn McCoy.
Wes and I just have to get our Pitt WGU banter in while we can. But I want to talk more about this, because now, going away from the article, but kind of hitting on what Ben was kind of hinting at about coddling, about Mike Tomlin and culture and me first. Is there a problem like that on the Pittsburgh Steelers? We'll talk about that in just a second here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, we got to talk to you guys about our great sponsor, Dave. Now, if you don't know about Dave, Dave is a banking app, and it's got a great opportunity for you to help you manage your money and also get you money when you're in trouble. If you're living paycheck to paycheck or struggling to make ends meet, it can be really stressful. But Extra Cash is a feature of Dave's new banking app that will get you up to $500 instantly right to your bank account. That's more money to fill up your tank, buy a wedding gift, or catch up on bills. You can finally tackle those expenses that they've been stressing you out without any hangups. There's no interest, no credit check needed. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get the financial financial relief that they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch and you need some extra help, download Dave and think of it as a helping hand from future you. Download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's D-A-V-E, Dave. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided from Evolve. Member FDIC. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter. He's Wes Uhler, and we're finishing up our thoughts here. Now, I know training camp players report tomorrow. So things are coming around on that. We'll be talking about that more tomorrow, getting you ready as well. But Wes, I wanted to get you on to get your thoughts about this, because a lot of what's reading between the lines of this article, or just reading this article, even read between the lines, like the fact that he gives credit to his college coach and Bill Cowher for never coddling him, but then saying Mike Tomlin did, and then talking about the me first attitude coming right after that and saying that things changed. There is a very tangible sort of narrative there that says that Tomlin was part of the problem of why the Steelers didn't win more playoff games. And that's a constant debate in Steelers fandom all over the place. There's some Steelers fans that say he's all the fault. Everything's his fault. If the Pouncey snapped the ball over quarterback Ben's
his
head,
fault. It's
Mike
not
Tomlin's
Heinz
fault.
Field anymore.
It's not Heinz Field anymore, and that Acrisure Stadium's taken over. Everything is Mike Tomlin's fault.
I heard Mike Tomlin personally recruited Acrisure to sponsor the stadium himself.
It was totally, everything was his fault. So there's people that think that, but there's reasonable things like, hey, you know what? There were certain games where they didn't play their best, and you do look at the body of work and you're saying, hey, you would wish things were better. And like we talked about, a lot of that's on Ben, because the defense would play great or the running game would play great, and he'd be the one to not show up. But going back to this me first thing, or is this really something right now? Because to me, I sense a lot of, like, when we were at minicamp and OTAs, I didn't hear a lot of me firsts. I heard a lot of, hey, I heard a lot of Kevin Dotson saying, like, hey, as offensive line, we got to do better by Najee, because he should have been a 2,000-yard back last year and we held him back. And then when I specifically asked that question to Najee, and he was like, the offensive line is gonna be better this year, and I'm excited for that. He didn't disparage them. He didn't say anything. He could have gone up and said, yeah, they were terrible. Did you see all the time I got hit in the backfield? He could have said something like that. Never did. Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph could say a lot of things right now, saying, you know what, this is messed up. Y'all drafted a quarterback. Y'all signed a quarterback. This ain't right. And now I'm dealing with this stuff. Neither him, nor Trubisky, nor Pickett have spoken out in any way about this bad competition or anything like that.
They were all as sensitive and as thoughtful as you could be with Stephon Tuitt the entire time.
And so right now, it feels like this is the kind of locker room that Ben Roethlisberger would want to be a part of, supposedly. And it's interesting. And yes, there were, Antonio Brown, head case, crazy. Like, we well acknowledge that. And there were people who've been in the locker room who weren't the best people to be around. But right now, there's not an open example of a malcontent who's on the roster right now. If you want to say Chase Claypool because he's a diva or whatever, you can make that argument, I guess.
Even Deontay Johnson showed up for OTAs.
Exactly. A guy who's upset he didn't get a new contract. He still showed up, still worked out, and he'll be there at training camp. This isn't a roster of me first guys, in my opinion. No. I think there were some guys that you could have said that about, but again, it strikes like maybe Ben Roethlisberger had some frustrations from his regrets, and again, instead of putting them on himself or what things he could have done, he talks about other people.
I think that's, now that we're kind of talking this out, I think that does make a lot of sense. Like, I could see why Ben would be very frustrated with how last year played out, and that's the end of, even though, he has that great send-off at Heinz Field and the team goes to the postseason, you think about the year before that, right? When the Steelers started, 10-0, 11-0, when they had home field advantage, all these different things, when he still had Pouncey and DeCastro, his guys in front of him. Like, maybe some of that from Ben was a little... like, that really should have been the the big year, the final run at it, and instead, we did this and that against Cleveland, and there were no fans in the stands the whole year, so it felt weird.
It sucked.
And then we come back this season, and I've got an offensive coordinator that I don't want, right? I've got an offensive line that's all dudes on their rookie contract, and Trey Turner coming off of injury, right?
Right.
Like, I could see why there's frustration there, and the way you kind of laid that out, like, that makes sense. Maybe Ben felt like the Steelers kept me around when they were starting a rebuild, but they just kept me there as kind of the last veteran guy and a figurehead, and let's let Ben go out in a normal season with fans and all these different things. I could see why he would be frustrated by that. But at the same time, it all comes back to me, like, I don't think that means that you have to make these some very clear and some very cryptic, seemingly, statements to Ron Cook and to the Post-Gazette. Listen, Ben has always been outspoken. He's never been a quiet guy, for better or for worse. But it comes back to kind of where we started for me, Chris. Like, if he had some issues over the last few seasons, he has those issues, and he's right to feel that way. That's, he's a professional athlete. He's prideful. He accomplished a lot for the organization, all these different things that that's his prerogative. He's allowed to feel that way. I don't want to crush him for that. 18 years, man. If the last year or two you felt like the team didn't do everything they could to put you in the best situation, okay. But do you really have to, like, throw some shade for how it ended when, man, 99% of the time it went so well? It just seems a little unnecessary, and it seems like, again, this is a guy you could legitimately argue is the most beloved figure in the history of an organization that has won 6 Super Bowls, that has had
one of the most storied franchises,
multiple Hall of Famers, and Ben is right up there with all the guys from the 70s, with Polamalu, with Hines Ward, with all of them. Isn't that more important than maybe getting, a shot or two on the way out the door? I was surprised by all this, and it just doesn't seem necessary to me, because he's everybody who's still in that building. Tomlin, I mean, I know Colbert now is in a different role, but
right.
A lot of those people are people that he battled with and worked with for literally decades. And I don't know. I would have thought that would have maybe, overshadowed what I said. Again, is I'm sure his right to feel a certain way about a few different things and how things ended.
Right. And to put more perspective and more time into this, let's say, let's look at the situation of not just this past year, but a few years ago, or not a few years ago, like back when he was talking about with the loss to Super Bowl 45 and the Packers, and he brought up how, like, that's one of his biggest regrets is not winning that game. Okay, cool. At the time, you think back, Ben was on the cusp of winning his 3rd Super Bowl, which would have tied him at the time with Tom Brady, who we now all talk about like as the GOAT. Everyone calls him the GOAT, GOAT. I'll go get the GOAT this, and no, he cheated all the time. But you hear that from people, and you think about, like, and I thought this at the time. I remember thinking at that time, and I'm in college, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, man, if Ben wins this game, he ties Tom Brady. The only quarterbacks with more Super Bowl wins than him are Joe Montana and Terry Bradshaw. And then, and then how good could the Steelers be over the next 10 years with him? Right. And you saw the Steelers make a concerted effort. Hey, Ben, here's a top 5 offensive line. Someone could say it at times was the best offensive line in the NFL. Here's the best running back in the NFL. Here's the best receiver in the NFL. Here's Heath Miller. Here's Juju Smith-Schuster. Here's Martavis Bryant. Here's Mike Wallace. They're giving him every single weapon they could. And never once, like when they were winning Super Bowls and were getting to AFC Championship games, the defense was ranked number 1. Never once did he get the offense to be the undisputed best offense in the NFL with all those weapons. And now some of that is also injuries. Le'Veon Bell missing all of 2015. Antonio Brown getting knocked out of the playoffs in 2015. I mean, everyone getting really knocked out of the playoffs in 2015.
Jeez, that's the year to me, even more so than the ones after. That's like the biggest what if. If they call that freaking sack on Peyton Manning that they should have called, or if Fitz Toussaint just holds on to the football.
Hold on to that football. Do they go in there and do they keep it going? Does AB come back for the next game? There's a lot of those types of questions that you could legitimately ask. And if you're Ben Roethlisberger, I get why maybe you're sitting back and thinking, like, dang, like 10 years ago, I thought I was going to be the GOAT. I thought I had a shot to be that guy.
Even though finished with four rings or something like Terry. Yeah,
exactly. But and I know that was part of Ben's. I think his mindset is he's like, I want to be the best ever in this city. But at the same time, because it didn't happen, it's not just about a couple guys here, a couple guys there. It's about You.
It is.
And to me, it's like if he has a problem with this me first mentality, he's like, you're exhibiting that in this article. And so I think that this thing here, and I think people are starting to wonder, well, it's our Tomlin's team just always going to be like this? Is
right.
I don't think Tomlin's teams were as much like this as someone might want to believe after reading this, and two, I don't think that they are right now with the team that the players they've had and the way that we've heard these guys talk.
I completely agree with you on that. It feels like a team that is very galvanized, that wants to prove, hey, yeah, we did just have a Hall of Fame quarterback, a first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback for 18 years who, 16, 17 of those 18 years gave us a chance to win every game every time we stepped out onto the field.
Yep.
But this is still the Pittsburgh Steelers. We've always been an organization that's bigger than any one player, any one coach, any one GM, any one owner, right? The Steelers are bigger than any individual, and we're going to prove that, while a lot of different entities and scouts and ESPN and NFL Network and Pro Football Focus, whatever, they might not think that we have the most talented roster, that we can still go out there and keep this thing humming and play meaningful football and contend for a playoff spot and a division title and all these different things. And like you said, that is, I think, maybe the most ironic part about this, if you just kind of look at the bird's eye view, if you take a step back, is that this seems like a group that Ben Roethlisberger would enjoy working with right now, as he's kind of, making some of these comments on the way out the door. Some of those names you mentioned, it is insane how many playmakers he had during his time here. I mean, it is. You didn't even mention, when you were running through all those names, I'm like, You didn't even mention Santonio Holmes.
Didn't even mention
first round player that they traded up for, who was a Super Bowl MVP.
Yep. Without him, they don't win this. They might not get to the Super Bowl.
By the way, maybe my hottest Steelers take as a lifelong fan / media member is that Santonio Holmes deserved to win that Super Bowl MVP. We can have that conversation at a different point. But there's
who argues that? Is there
a lot of people? A lot of people. Oh yeah, a lot of people think. I guarantee you, we're gonna have in the comments and in our mentions people saying, "Oh yeah, Ben should have been the MVP because he led that drive down the field." Look up Ben's stats in that game when he wasn't throwing the ball to Santonio Holmes.
Exactly.
They also too, Chris. And it's funny how this comes full circle with the Packers game and all that. I mean, Rashard Mendenhall was a first-round pick as well, too. So, first-round picks, second-round picks, third-round picks, all over the place at running back and wide receiver and offensive line during Ben's time there. That's what this all comes back to me. I think that's my thesis of today's conversation. Like, the Steelers did everything right by Ben Roethlisberger for at least 17 of the 18 years that he was in the black and gold. To me, I don't even think I have to take sides here, but I come down on the organization doing right as opposed to Ben being scorned. And like I said, he's allowed to feel however he wants. He's a professional athlete. He's a grown man. He's a future first ballot Hall of Famer. He's retired. And again, I don't know if I'm just saying this for lack of better words, for a better term. Like, I side, and I'm using air quotes here, with the organization. I don't think it's a war. It's not a battle. You don't have to pick sides. But I don't think the Steelers were in the wrong. Mr. Rooney, Kevin Colbert, Mike Tomlin. I think they did right throughout his 2 decades with the team.
And on top of that is, like, I not only think they did right. I think my biggest, like you said, he can talk about whatever he talks, but I'm just saying, like, I don't think there is a war. But now here is a major news topic right before Steelers training camp is start, the first without Ben Roethlisberger, and here he is talking in ways that get us wondering about the organization. And it's just, that's where I think the misstep is. But hey, again, he's allowed to
3 years from now, he'll get into the Hall of Honor. They'll have a massive ceremony at halftime before he gets into the Hall of Fame 2 years later, and it'll all be sunshine and rainbows and roses and hugs and kisses.
The Steelers have made it clear they're never going to turn that man away. They're never going to make him. They're going to make sure they honor him as much as they can. The man got 2 Super Bowl rings while they were there. They are not going to turn him away at any point in time.
And in the same way that, that's not an unofficially retired thing, like 75, like 50, like 52, no one's ever wearing 7 again.
And no one should. I think that he has earned the right to be in those conversations. So absolutely, I do think it's going to be. I look forward to seeing those days when hopefully everything is further removed, and maybe some of the frustrations he has kind of settled a little bit. Like, you know what, I'm retired. Look at all this. Look at all the honor that's being given to me. Look at all the fans that still love me. I think by that time,
that's going to
you
happen
won't hear those.
too. No doubt.
Right.
No
I
doubt.
think he'll get to that point. But Wes, thanks so much for coming on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Always appreciate you for coming on the show. Let people can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, good time to plug it. Arthur Moats and I, you guys know if you've listened to this podcast, if you heard me before, Steelers Blitz is the show that I host on SNR with Moatsy, the former Steelers linebacker. Every day, get this, folks, every day that there is a Steelers practice at training camp, which is basically every day for the next 3 weeks. Arthur Moats and I are going to be live at noon on SNR from Latrobe. Practice starts at 1:55, so we'll be leading right up to practice. We have a different guest, a Steelers alumni guest, every single day. I was looking down the list the other day that we have Alan Faneca, we have Charlie Batch, we have Rocky Blyer. I mean, we've got everyone from we've got Mel Blunt, we've got John Kolb, we've got everyone from every different era and every different position, someone different every day. So if you're looking for your Steelers fix for live coverage throughout training camp, high noon, that's Eastern time for those of you displaced across the globe. Moatsy and I on SNR every day out in Latrobe at the Steelers practice. And, of course, always you can get us in podcast form. Just search Steelers Blitz wherever you get your podcasts.
Absolutely do check them out. They do amazing work, and sometimes I'll be on there. I'm no Alan Faneca, nor no Charlie Batch. But I like
Cam Heyward?
I'm going to punch you in the face.
Yeah. Mic drop. I'm out of here.
Yeah, that was actually a great way to go out. You got me. All right. Do check out Wes Uhler at Wesley Uhler on Twitter. Do check out all his work at Steeler Nation Radio and his Ears and Beers podcast with Adam Crowley as they cover the West Virginia Mountaineers. Backyard Brawls coming up, baby. Looking forward to talking about that with you guys. I'm
38 days.
Yeah, crazy. Who's counting? I'm Chris Carter. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. You can check out this show, the Locked On Steelers podcast, on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button on this video if you've enjoyed. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content whenever we got it coming out. If you want to help out the show, give us a 5-star review with a positive comment. Do both at the same time. You get a special shout out at the end of the show. Like this person, we have Notorious Joe says best Steelers coverage you can find. Notorious Joe says, listen to the show every day, even in the offseason. Chris Carter is one of the best in the business and brings great insight on the team all year round. Looking forward to another great season and listening to Chris break it down the whole way. Joe from Chicago. Thank you, Joe, for Chicago. Appreciate your 5-star review. We actually got a lot coming up that we want to read for our 5-star review. Thanks to everyone who drops them. If you haven't already, you can do it. If you have already, do it again. It really does help us out and getting the word about the show. We're back tomorrow. We're going to give you a preview as players do report Tuesday. We'll do a show leading into Tuesday to get you ready for all the things you need to be thinking about as training camp starts right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We'll see you soon.